be allowed into the Zoom call by me. And on that note, welcome to Flashback to the Track. I am Mark, and I am joined, as always, by my compatriot, James, this time, for the first time ever, via Zoom and not Skype.
That's right. And Zoom, if you want, you can reach out to us and we'll talk to you about how we can work something out for us to have more premium access to Zoom. Because I don't know, is this basic Zoom, Mark? Because
this is the basic, like, we're cheap and we got the free Zoom. Yes.
Yeah. So this isn't corporate Zoom. So Zoom, shout out to you.
Or it's just, if anyone's out there that has a corporate login and will let us use it, that could work as sponsorship too. So let us know. Watching on YouTube, let us know, and listening if you think the audio and video quality is better, and then we will compare, and maybe we'll continue using Zoom, but we're trying it this week. So, James, what is this week's topic?
So we like to...
Oh, sorry, we are always brought to you by Blue Emu. We should probably get that in there, so...
Yeah, you should, Mark, because you can have many things from Blue Emu, such as lidocaine pain relief cream. You can have lidocaine dry patches. Awesome. You can have it in cream or patch. Or if you're feeling fancy, try a Blue Emu recovery bath. That's right.
Highly recommend the Blue Emu recovery bath, by the way. Recovery. It's the best. It's unbelievable. It smells amazing. And
for your bath,
you feel unreal when you get up. Thanks as always to Blue Emu for sponsoring the Flashback to the Track podcast.
Oh, yes.
Continue, James.
This week, as always, because Blue Emu wants us to get onto a new topic. They were like, James, celebrities are cool. Could you tell us about some celebrities in NASCAR? And I'm like, well, I think Mark and I could try to come up with something. So we did a little bit of a deep dive, and we tried to pull up some celebrity team owners in NASCAR. Now, when we say celebrity, we're talking about celebrities from all walks of life. I'm talking about movie stars, singers and songwriters, Mark's favorite, professional athletes, and of course, more professional athletes, because why not?
Yeah, man. Celebrity team owners. It's interesting. Celebrities have a lot of money, and they have to decide things to do with their money, right? And investments. And what's not fun and cool, James? Putting your money into mutual funds and things that are safe. What's fun is buying strip clubs and buying race teams. So why not buy a race team, right? So
by fun, you mean sexy, right?
Basically.
Because those are all sexy things.
It's appealing. Buying a restaurant, buying a nightclub, things that are terrible business decisions, if you ask anyone, but are sexy. So a race team is cool. You can entertain people at the racetrack. You can have trophies in your office. It's a really cool idea. There have been a lot of celebrity team owners in NASCAR, and it dates back a lot farther than you think. I know you probably think of some of the recent ones, some of the football guys and basketball guys that have been involved in NASCAR, but going all the way back, we did some research, and well, you ever seen Smokey and the Bandit? Burt Reynolds actually did own a race team in real life. So that's the first one we're going to talk about, James. Burt Reynolds.
Yeah. If you didn't know, and you probably do know, Burt Reynolds, Hal Needham had a race team back in the day. It was called Mach 1 Racing. Now, Hal and Burt were pretty tight from a lot of their work on films like Smokey and the Bandit. And, that relationship spawned with a fellow other stuntman and racer, Stan Barrett. And Stan was actually the team's first driver, the primary driver, when the team first formed in 1981 to go into the Cup Series. He drove the number 22 at the time, and that was the number 22 Skull Racing Pontiac. That's right. Not 33. It was 22. Now, they did field a second car, and that was driven by Harry Gant, and that was the number 33 Skull Pontiac. So they had a two-car effort. It wasn't a full-blown two-car effort. Harry only ran a couple of races. He actually ran Darlington and Talladega that season. And when Stan was released from the team, Harry continued on. He was actually the primary driver. And instead of switching to the number 22, they just kept with Harry's identity as the number 33. And that's what became, the Skull Bandit number 33, that iconic car that we all know nowadays, green and white with that Burt and Hal, on the side. It was such a cool and iconic car for so many years, Mark. That's probably like my favorite car and one of the most successful early celebrity teams.
Yeah, and that Skull Bandit car, like it transcended after that. It lasted for several more years as different entities, still running the number 33 with the Smoking the Bandit sponsorship, because Bert's ownership stake in the team ended. They lost the Skull Bandit in after 1988, and then they did run a team for one more season, but with a different number. And Harry took that sponsorship and number to another team. So, but definitely iconic. Like every time there's a throwback to it, it's like you can't go wrong. I think there was a throwback to it a couple of years ago, even though it was unsponsored, but you knew just looking at it, it was 33 with the green. I'm like, Skull Bandit, man. It's an awesome, awesome car.
Yeah, I think Mike Bliss drove that one actually at Darlington. That was a pretty cool throwback because, like you said, it just felt right with the number, at least on the side, and the way the paint scheme looked. It's so iconic. It transcends even the sponsor itself. And we spoke of Gant being their primary driver. Gant was really successful with this team. I mean, in 1981 alone, he earned 33 poles, 13 top tens in just those 22 starts with this super team. And it was crazy how much success they would go on to have. From 1981 to 1988 specifically, they earned 9 wins, 67 top fives, 107 top 10 finishes, and 13 poles. And in 1984, Harry Gant actually finished second in overall season standings that year. All right. That is insane that, Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, they have no idea what, NASCAR really is. They're not always involved in it. And here they've formed a team, very successful out of the gate too, Mark, might I say. I mean, they were, showcasing that they had speed from the start. And Harry Gant is always known as a strong qualifier. He always knows how to get like a quick lap out of a car. And he comes in with this new team and he can wheel the car. And not only that, they give him a good car to wheel. So, I mean, they definitely had the right people to work around at the time. And we're definitely throwing the money the right way,
Yeah, they did it the right way. They got the right people. They had competitive equipment. They came in at the right time, and they were lucky enough. They started off with Stan Barrett, someone who was maybe not up to the level that he should have been to be in Cup. And they learned from that, and then they brought Gant in, and then they were incredibly successful. I actually didn't realize how successful this team was until we did the research and be like, wow, that's crazy for a team. You'd think a team owned by Burt Reynolds in the 80s would be like, some fun team, but no, they were a legitimate team, second in points in 1984. So pretty crazy, man. And Morgan Shepherd ended up driving for them in 1988 after Gant moved on. And then in 89, they ran the number 66, and then they sold the team because, as we always say, teams never die, James. They just take other forms. So they sold the team to Travis Carter, which became the 66 car that for years afterwards, that guys like Todd Bodine drove, Darrell Waltrip, became that team. So Burt Reynolds, man. Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I remember hearing the Dale Jr. download with Harry Gant, and it's crazy to hear that they were one of the first teams to put computers into cars, and computers were huge back in the day. And just imagine this team with the money they had back in the day, have that Hollywood money, that's and new ideas. You bring different people into the sport with different ideas, and you can try different things and innovate it and push, what is now the future standard of the sport. It's crazy that, yeah, people would think Burt Reynolds, he's just having fun, but they did have fun with this team because, with this team, obviously we got the product of Stroker Ace, film that's just timeless. A lot of fans love it. I find it very funny as well. And it's got a lot of good references. Gant's in the movie. And I mean, come on, if you're Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, and this is also your side project movie, you're going to plug your driver too. So it was pretty cool. And there's also a lot of cool other NASCAR drivers, but I don't know. It's just a perfect storm of the time. Like, I don't think any other actor today could come in and try to do this, obviously, because of just how hard the sport is, to compete in. But not only that, just the amount of resources it takes to truly compete now, it's different. So it's, I don't know, different team, different time. It's so beautiful.
Definitely a team of their time, James. Definitely. Maybe one to consider in the future. But Burt Reynolds is one of those guys that want to be involved in different things. You know, he owned a race team. He had all kinds of different investments. He owned a USFL team when the United States Football League started for a couple of years there in the 80s. He was part owner of the Tampa Bay team. So just trying out all kinds of different things. And cool that we had him as an owner in NASCAR. Next up on our list, though, James, is someone that, I don't know, maybe our younger audience hasn't heard of, but Marty Robbins is a musician. He's a country, basically like an old timey country Western musician, very kind of like cowboy songs, things like that. Had a bunch of different styles of music. I remember famously his song El Paso, because my dad was like obsessed with that song. He used to play it like all the time. It's one of those songs that's like 18 minutes long. It's like a million verses. But solid track. But Marty Robbins, really interesting that he actually drove, had an interest in becoming a race car driver, but owned his own team as well and had his own race cars. So, James, you did some digging into Marty Robbins.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Cotton Owens would prepare his cars and worked for Marty, but he was mostly an independent, which is crazy to think about. In the era of NASCAR he drove in, though, independents were still common. We always hear of the name Dave Marcus, definitely one of the greatest independents ever in the sport. Marty was an independent who truly ran a very limited schedule. Okay. From 1970 to 1972, Robbins Enterprises only made 11 starts. But in those 11 starts, Marty Robbins earned 3 top 10s, including back-to-back top 10s in the Southern 500. Okay. This is like super competitive NASCAR back in the day, high attrition rate as well. This guy comes in making a few starts a year against guys like Cale Yarbrough, Richard Petty, Dave Marcus, like some really heavy hitters back in the day, Donnie Allison, and he's competitive. It's crazy to think that, Mark. You couldn't do that nowadays at all. And this is a guy, Marty, I don't really know how old he was when he got into NASCAR, but he wasn't a spring chicken, he's an older guy coming into.
No, he's definitely an older guy. Cause I think I looked up how old he was. I think he was born in the 20s. So he would have been a much older guy getting into it, basically like a gentleman driver, as you would think, right?
Think of like Paul Newman back in the day too.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good one to bring up. So Paul Newman, it's interesting that he ran so few races, but was so competitive. Like, even if you talk to a really good race car driver now, like the guys that we know that only race 8 or 9 races a year, how hard it is to show up and try and win against the guys that race every week. And Robbins was able to get top 10s as like a musician who likes to race sometimes. So that's really crazy, man. Like, and you made a note, like he might be one of the most underrated drivers ever, if you really think about it. So
yeah, like look at his stats. It's great because like there's a lot of articles that have spoken about this over the last couple of years. It's great that people have looked at Marty's entire life, not just his like achievements within music and entertainment, because he's very talented as a multi instrumentalist, an actor, a singer, but race car driver, most people don't see that. But when you, like you said, Mark, you look at his stats, you really just, if you are just the kind of person that just looks at the stats and the numbers on the page and you can't just look beyond that, that's already impressive enough. And that was just his first team. And then there was Robbins Racing, because he ran a pretty extensive cup career from the late 60s till the early 80s. But with Robbins Racing, he ran from 1973 to 1980. During that time period, he only made 20 starts. He was a strong contender in the 1973 Daytona 500. Highly recommend anybody going and checking that race out. It's a really interesting one. If you can find it too. I found it like on Daily Motion, so don't really highly suggest going on those sites to look for video content. But he also earned his first and only career top 5 in 1974 at Michigan, and his final career top 10 at Talladega the same year. So he had a competitive career, towards the end, probably not so much, but, to your point, Mark, the sport at that point started to really evolve, and that competitive nature of making only a few handful of starts just maybe caught up with Marty.
Yeah, and you asked, you were thinking about his age. I looked it up. Like, so he was in his late 40s when he would have been racing in the early 70s, and
Wow.
He actually passed away in 1983, late 1982. He was only 57 when he passed away. But if you go back on Spotify to episode 26, we had Brian Cleary on. He's a Florida-based NASCAR photographer, and he actually talked about a couple times when he actually did photo shoots with Marty Robbins when he was involved in NASCAR. So that's really cool if you go back and check that story out. James, next up is a more recent, but then kind of not because he's been around forever, and someone that a lot of people, including myself, don't even think of when we think of celebrity team owners. Joe Gibbs.
Yeah, the
Like
coach.
I know him more as a NASCAR owner than I do as a 3-time Super Bowl winning NFL head coach. So like, but
Yeah.
he's a celebrity team owner, right?
Well, technically, yes. And we only and we say celebrity just because, a celebrity is someone normally in regarded above the public eye, someone people would look up to, who has like a status. We're not saying that Joe in himself is a celebrity. He probably wouldn't even look at himself as a celebrity either. He's just an average guy. And that's kind of how I see him too. And I think that's what makes him kind of fly under the radar for a lot of fans, to not recognize that he had a status somewhere else before NASCAR, just because of the way he carries himself. Obviously, Mark, was an NFL coach, man, for the Washington football team. Had a great career there, man. You're more of the football statistician. So like, explain to me how, like, as a football coach, him making that decision to like leave the position he had after winning the Super Bowl to come to NASCAR.
Well, it's really just looking for some other form of another challenge, right? Like being someone who won 3 Super Bowls with the, as you said, now as they're known, the Washington football team. He is regarded as one of the greatest head coaches in NFL history. So, but like I said, like I completely forgot that happened because I more know him for NASCAR, and he actually did end up winning more championships in NASCAR than he did in the NFL. Granted, he owns 4 teams in the NFL.
It took him a while.
The NFL, he had 1. So,
but think about this: he's only won it with 2 teams. If you think about it, he only won it with the 20 and the 18 team.
Yeah, well, so back to the origin though. So 92, he retired from coaching and then decided he was going to start a NASCAR team. So that's what ended up happening. Now he did go back and coach later on, and actually, if you watch the 2005 Homestead race, Tony Stewart gets hooked up to him in the victory lane when they give him the trophy for the championship. And Coach Joe Gibbs had actually coached a game that day and couldn't be in Homestead, and was like, no, unfortunately we lost the game, Tony, but thank you for winning the championship. So he did briefly go back and coach for a couple of years, and it didn't work out. But Joe Gibbs Racing was founded in 1992. Dale Jarrett was their first driver, and they had the iconic number 18 Interstate batteries at that time, Chevy Lumina. So when they debuted, love those Luminas, man. I love the photos of the Luminas from back in the day.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that was a sexy car, man.
They drove as a Chevy team from 92 to 2007. Sorry, as a GM team. They did switch to Pontiac in the late 90s and early 2000s, actually winning 2 championships with Pontiac. They won their first championship in 2000 with Bobby Labonte, and their second championship in 2002 with Tony Stewart, and then switched to Toyota in 2008. So now they're the flagship Toyota team in the Cup Series. They're pretty much like the only Toyota team really in the Cup Series that has any sort of like, I guess, support from Toyota. So, and they've won, as I said before, 5 drivers championships in Cup and 2 in the Xfinity Series.
Yep. And, it just speaks volumes to Coach, because he went and found a new challenge, obviously met that challenge in NASCAR. That's probably why he went back to coaching, because like he already had won 2 championships in the Cup Series with both of his organizations. And he's like, well, guess I should go back and try to see if I can conquer football again. And fortunately didn't pan out. But I mean, Coach Gibbs has brought a lot of great influence into the sport. Man, just so much positivity, such a great person. Good thing that he is in the sport. And you know what? A biggest thing I always love about him is the fact that he has the Drive for Diversity program, the original, diversity program that started with Reggie White, Magic Johnson, and my hometown driver, Eric Almirola, was actually their first driver. So that to me really made me take note of Joe Gibbs Racing when I was a kid. Like, that was a big deal. Unfortunately, Reggie died in 2004, but the legacy of the of the program kind of carried on through him, and especially with Eric, because Eric ran the number 92 during his initial season. And actually, I think he ran the number 92 in Cup too. Wasn't that the number he ran? Or was it 80
There's
actually?
number 80, I think.
I knew it was a higher number. I didn't know if actually they carried that tribute on any further, but at least they ran it through that season. It was a very honorable thing to do, and such a great program. It just started the careers for a lot of drivers, such as, Almirola, obviously Bubba Wallace kind of came through that a little bit, and then you had Mark Davis that kind of came through that as well. So it was kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, it's cool. Like when I was doing the research and going back, and I didn't realize that Joe Gibbs is one of the main proponents of that diversity program until I actually looked it up. And back then, it'll come up again as we talk about some other celebrity owners, but NASCAR was really looking for celebrities of minority groups to get involved in that diversity program, right? To help fund young drivers. And there were some cool things that came out of it. And obviously now we still have what's now known as NASCAR Next, which is still a great program. We've had Ryan Vargas on, we've had Roger Carruth on to talk about it. And it's great that, Joe Gibbs was able to use, his status as a, NASCAR team owner to help develop that program.
And not only that too, but think about the environment he's in the NFL. It's a very diverse environment, know? So why not try to, carry that over too? So I feel like there's a lot of value you can have from other disciplines that you can kind of carry into NASCAR. Speaking of which, let's talk about a different kind of field. It's not even a field. Let's talk about a court and a guy who comes from the hardwood, the man, the myth, the broadcasting legend, Brad Daugherty. That's right, Brad Daugherty, Mark. I mean, most people don't know that Brad Daugherty has been in NASCAR as long as he has been, because people might just know him for JTG.
Yeah,
and racing.
No, man, Liberty Racing, right?
Liberty Racing, dude. Yeah, back in the day.
But some background though, like on Brad Daugherty. So he actually got into NASCAR. He wanted to get into NASCAR like after he retired from the NBA in '94. He played for the Cleveland Cavaliers his whole career. And people don't know this, but when he was in college in the pros, he wore number 43 because of Richard Petty. He was a massive NASCAR fan growing up, which is really cool. And he wanted to wear number 43 because of that. I played at North Carolina, so he grew up around NASCAR in the area and always wanted to get involved. And after he retired, he said, I'm going to do it. And as James said, he got involved in the truck series with Liberty Racing.
Yeah. And, it's not that grand of a steal because you think about, it's a truck series, but hey, you're getting on the ground floor of the series. It was kind of booming. And during the period when Brad was really a competitive team owner, which was 1997. So that's when the team first launched. They had driver Kenny Irwin Jr., and sponsor Ray Bestis, that beautiful number 98. And during that season, Kenny earned the team 2 victories. First win at Homestead and the second victory at Texas, which just put him on the map. Later, he got noticed by a guy named Robert Yates, and then the rest is history, and he went up to Cup. But then Brad got a second driver, got Kevin Harvick, who drove for him in 1999 and 1998, until Harvick would then move into the Busch Series with RCR. So, I mean, initially this team helped, jumpstart careers for 2 really interesting drivers that just went to Cup eventually,
Yeah, and it's crazy that they didn't only exist for those 3 years. They had so many great drivers, and then Brad kind of disappeared out of the sport after that for a little bit. And then when ESPN got its NASCAR deal in 2007, they had the entire Xfinity series and the second half of the Cup schedule. They brought Brad in as an analyst because he's a former team owner. He knows NASCAR. And that was actually met with scrutiny from fans because they're like, some people were like, well, this is a basketball player and he's going to call NASCAR as an analyst. He was amazing, and he still is amazing. He's back now with NBC, and he's awesome. The guy knows so much. And then that got him, but he's back in the garage hanging out, back into ownership in 2008.
Yeah, he signed with JTG to become part owners of that team with Tad and Jody Kachichter, and obviously JTG Daugherty Racing, as we know it today, continues on. And what's great too, you talk about Brad Daugherty as being a person who brings diversity into the sport as an owner. I mean, he brought it in with his driver, Marcus Ambrose, Australian driver in NASCAR. It was big. Yeah, you could say a lot about the success of the 47 team that they would have. But honestly, Mark, I remember back in the day, they would have a lot of runs inside the top 15, kind of knocking on the doors inside of the top 10. And all of a sudden something would happen and then just their day would end. Like they had good runs going a lot of the time. Didn't they have like a partnership too with Michael Waltrip Racing as well?
Briefly. So at the end of '08 was when Marcus Ambrose started running some cup races with Wood Brothers, because they were with the Wood Brothers at that time. And then that deal ended and he ran some races in a Toyota. And then in '09, they got their stuff from Michael Waltrip Racing to run Toyotas for Marcus Ambrose in the Cup Series. '09 and 2010, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. I'm sure some person will comment that we got that wrong, but that's fine. Thank you for the comment.
Thanks for that. But what's cool too is like, the team obviously would evolve and become, a pattern of success because, success comes with victory. And the team did earn a victory when they secured driver AJ Allmendinger in the 47 car. And he actually scored his first victory at Watkins Glen in 2014, which was huge because he would defeat Marcus Ambrose for that victory. So kind of fitting for the team to beat their former driver with their new driver to earn their first victory. But, it was, I don't know, it's kind of underwhelming that this team currently just only has one victory. I feel like they should have at least two or three, just on road courses alone, and maybe a couple of oval wins. I mean, they're very strong on the short tracks and they do shine on super speedways as well.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. They're really like kind of that B tier team right now, where they have stuff from Hendrick, but it's just not all gelling. Maybe I think they're really struggling with not having practice. I think that's something that would really benefit them. But they're a fun team to root for. They have two full-time cars now with the 47 and the 37. They've got the coolest paint schemes in the garage. They run a different paint scheme every race for all their different sponsors with Clorox and Kingsford. And man, Jody and Tageschichter, they've had the same sponsors since the late 90s. So actually, I think Kingsford has been on that car since like the early 90s when they first started their team. So,
oh yeah. I think what that goes to is like also the first off, yes, building a relationship and having good people to work with. Obviously, Brad Daugherty partnered with really great people. Okay, that's why we've mentioned him early on this list because he's a very great model of success to look at.
Yeah, it only gets worse from here.
Sorry, people. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But seriously, he partners with a man who's built a relationship with brands that continue to want to be in racing, which is always a losing proposition no matter what industry you're in. It's very hard to make money in racing and to see an ROI, but his companies do. Kroger really likes the team. The marketing plan that they have with the team, like Mark has spoke about, to have different paint schemes every week, exposing different sponsors, having different partners on the car, gives them more market value, and it's really helped the team. And yeah, to your point, Mark, from what I hear with fans, the way they talk about it on the internet, it's kind of like their perception of JTG is like they're like a Levine family racing. Yeah, they get the stuff from Hendrick, but it's a car that's not the most latest and greatest.
They're not
to say that
not saying Hendrick shafting them, but they're not getting
or that they're not that
Elliott
good
stuff. They're getting like the
They're not getting the most experimental top of the line thing. And it's not to say that they're not trying either, but the team is obviously focusing their efforts elsewhere. And it shows, like when they won the Daytona 500 pole, it showed that they had the best Chevrolet out of all the Chevrolets. They had the most modern everything. Now, sometimes during the season, you can't have the latest and greatest. So what? You just make it work. And sometimes they make it work really well. And even like we try not to mention recent races, but like, there's been some recent runs in the last couple of races we've seen with this team that it shows, hey, they have speed to be able to compete. It's just all about that timing. And they're a team that can really slip in there if they just get the right strategy to work their way during a race. So, and that's why they're successful. And that's why, definitely they're higher up on the list this time. Mark, this is one that I kind of keep forgetting, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people keep forgetting too. Technically, Roush Fenway Racing has someone of a public figure or celebrity status, you would say, John Henry, who is one of the co-owners of Roush Fenway Racing. Mr. Henry was actually principal owner of Fenway Sports Group that was created back in 2001. And from there in 2007, an opportunity became for him to buy a stake in Roush Racing and then form what is today as Roush Fenway Racing. Now, we're not going to go deep diving into stats with Roush Fenway, but at least since the Fenway application has come into play, Mark, Roush has had some pretty competitive years. They've won several Xfinity Series championships, 3 to be exact, but their Xfinity Series program is gone now, and their Cup Series program has shrunken quite a bit from where it was when this initial merger came about.
Yeah, man, from 5 cars down to 4. So down to 4, down to 3, down to 2. So, well, the 5 to 4 was a NASCAR rule, and then just funding after that, right? 4 to 3, and then now, fortunately, just 2 full-time cars, no Xfinity program, no truck program, just 2 Cup cars.
Yeah, though I feel like with this move, Henry's group has really helped this team kind of stay around, because just think if this like investor or person wasn't here to like help that team at this time, you saw how much Greg Biffle's team was struggling to secure sponsorships through the 2007 season. And then afterwards, once Biffle's team lost sponsorship, then the 16 team closes down, and then Bain's there with Advocare, but they're bringing Advocare money, and then they are what they are today because of the shrinkage, because they had to close teams down because they didn't have sponsorship dollars. So, I mean, it's definitely helped this team stay around, but at some point we gotta ask ourselves, is this something we're gonna have to see from other teams? Are we gonna have to see that cash daddy come in and help them?
I don't know, man. It feels like that time's over. But we'll see. Hopefully, as NASCAR changes and grows and gets a newer, younger fan base, more people will want to get involved. So,
yeah, and more companies will want to sponsor too, because that's the big thing. Especially for more than a race. Spend 5 races instead of 1 race. All right, we'll be right back to the podcast, but first, we'd like to bring you a quick message from our sponsors at Blue Emu. That's right, because Blue Emu has a wonderful product that comes in a can. That's right, you can can it. You can can this, and this is Blue Emu Continuous Spray. That's right. Now, if you're looking for some relief that you can just apply in a mist, try this Blue Emu Continuous Spray. And don't forget to click it while you're in the store back and forth, because that's probably the most fun thing about it. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Right. A couple more times. Oh, you're not going to do it anymore? Aw, what a tease. Now back to the podcast.
Next up, we're going to go through a gauntlet of NFL quarterbacks that have owned race teams, because there has been a lot. There was a time in the late 90s, early 2000s, when all former NFL quarterbacks were required to own a race team. So we're going to start off with a Joe Gibbs connection, Mark Rypien. So Mark Rypien was one of Joe Gibbs' quarterbacks when he was the coach for Washington. And he said, hey, I also want to start a race team because it's cool that coach did, so I'm going to do it as well. And in the early 90s, he decided to start a team in partnership with Greg Paulex, who you might recognize, was later the owner of PPC Racing, a championship-winning NASCAR Xfinity, or at the time, Busch Series team. They won the 2000 championship with Jeff Green. They decided that they were going to run the full Busch Series schedule with the number 23 between 1993 and 96. And their driver was Chad Little. So Chad Little drove for the team. In 96, they started doing some part-time Cup stuff. And then in 97, went full-time in Cup with that beautiful number 97 John Deere Pontiac. And unfortunately, the team lasted not even the whole season, as Rippon sold the team to Jack Roush with, I think it was about 8 or 9 races left in the season. And it became a Ford team for 98. And Jack Roush was the owner. So very short-lived team, at least their effort in Cup. But they did win some races with Chad Little in Busch Series. So fairly successful, I would say, of the NFL quarterbacks we're going to talk about. He's pretty successful. So
Yeah, I mean, like, for the team in the Xfinity Series, I mean, they finished top 5 in 94 and 95, 96 as well. I mean, they were a very strong Xfinity Series team for sure. Unfortunately, they just couldn't make that transition to Cup, man. And they had, like we spoke just about with JTG, they had really good sponsors. Like, they had Bayer Aspirin on the car, and this was, like you said, at the time when a lot of companies wanted just to be associated with NASCAR. It didn't really matter what level it was. Just being associated was huge for their market value and their presence in the sport. So it was cool to see that. And Chad Little's a cool guy. He's a happened racer that always had the skills and abilities. And for losing my place here, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
For Rippon to see the value in Chad obviously showed that, he wasn't making this decision alone. Greg really advised him well to, kind of make the good decisions, because they had a very strong Xfinity Series team, man. It's just a shame it couldn't translate up to Cup like coaches did, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, the great thing is, as we say, teams never die. So Jack Roush bought it out, and that 97 team won the 2004 championship with Kurt Busch in the Cup Series. Fun fact, at the end of 97, Roush was actually contractually obligated to continue fielding that team as a Pontiac, despite his team being a Ford, because the deal with Pontiac meant they had to do it the rest of the season. So kind of funny that they fielded Pontiacs and Fords at the same time. So that's a fun fact for you.
Yeah,
I don't know how fun it was, but it's a fact anyway. Next up is the man, the myth, the legend, the all-time leader was the all-time leader in touchdowns and in interceptions, Brett Favre.
He's the all-time leader in Wrangler jeans, baby.
In Wrangler jeans commercials and sending unsolicited photos to interns. Brett Favre, his is an interesting story, James, because he tried to get into NASCAR multiple times and then eventually got there. So,
and that's the thing. It's eventually he broke through, but it's an interesting what if it would have worked and stuck the first time. Because the first deal, honestly, the most lucrative deal in 1997, came along when Bud Moore, who wasn't fielding his team anymore, but still had it, was willing to sell his team to Tim Steele's family, his father actually, and Brett Favre. Now, when Brett was going to buy the team, he already had Nike and Sony lined up as sponsors for Tim Steele to be the driver.
Sponsors.
Yeah. 2 huge sponsors to go into what would have been the 50th anniversary season of NASCAR, the biggest year of the sport at the time. And to come in with a hot shoe who was an ARCA, just, I don't know what's a nice word to say about just a guy who would murder everybody any given race. Jeez, Tim Steele just knew how to wheel the car on 1.5 miles. If he would have made it to Cup with the way the series had evolved and gone away from short tracks more towards 1.5 miles and intermediate tracks, Tim Steele would have owned the sport, especially with this team. The money they had coming in, the swagger they had, it would have been a different story. But unfortunately, it never happened. Tim Steele was involved in a practice accident in Atlanta, and it was testing. They were just testing the car. They were about to buy the team and sign the deal, and the accident happened, and it was a devastating crash, Mark. I mean, it's a shame that Tim had it. There's a really interesting bit you can learn from a small doc called Tough as Steel, or is it Tough Like Steel? I'm not sure. We can fact check that, Jamie, at some point. But it really sheds some light on it. But that was Brett's first initial venture into NASCAR in 1997. Now, he took some time off, but Mark, he wasn't going to, stay away. He wanted to come back.
Yeah, in 1999, he made his dream come true, and he bought 25% ownership of Dale Jarrett's Busch Series team. So Dale, at this time, this is also a time when like every Cup Series guy that raced in the Busch Series owned their own stuff. They would all start their own teams because, as James said, there were so many companies that wanted to get involved in NASCAR. So there was sponsorship to go around for everyone. But he bought into the team in 99. They fielded the number 11 Ford. And Favre was able to use, his celebrity status, his fame as the Packers QB to get Wisconsin company Rayovac to sponsor the team. They were originally going to have Jarrett drive a bunch of races and have Robert Yates, other Cup drivers, come in, but they signed on Kenny Irwin Jr. He was going to run 11 races. This is a time when Kenny Irwin had gone straight from trucks to Cup. So this was an opportunity to get Kenny Irwin some more experience in a Busch Series car. So he ran 11 races. In the debut at Texas, he finished 5th. So it was an awesome debut for the team. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. They weren't very successful in 99. Irwin only qualified for 5 of the 11 races they attempted. So just wasn't, I don't know if it just didn't gel. Like I'm not sure what the deal was.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too, because like you said, for Kenny, this was all about, him trying to go into the Xfinity Series or Busch Series at the time and just get some experience, get some more confidence, get a good run, feel good about the track. So when it comes to Sunday, it could transition to him being successful there. And it just unfortunately never did. There was a really cool paint scheme, though, that came from this, Mark, at Darlington. I hope somebody does this throwback at some point.
Yeah, he drove the Green Bay Packers car, which is like one of the most sought after diecasts on the internet now to find.
Yeah, a very cheap version too of the diecast. Yeah. It's not even like an elite or anything.
No, it's like garbage. Yeah, but everyone wants to get a hold of it, because there's so few of them. And I'm opposed. I'm a Detroit Lions fan, so like, screw that. Like, I'll buy it.
You don't like cheeseheads.
Buy it and throw it out. But yeah, in 2000. They switched weirdly. They switched to Pontiac, which is strange because like Jarrett was a Ford driver, but money, whatever, right? Let's make it work. So went to Pontiac. They switched to Chevy after a couple of races, and this time the opportunity was to have Dale's son Jason run the entire season. Very inexperienced at the bigger racetracks. He failed to qualify a bunch of times. He had only one top 20 finish. So they brought in a veteran, Hut Strickland. He ran a couple races to evaluate the team. And I guess his evaluation was to not race anymore because at the end of the season, they decided to shut down because Rayovac was leaving the team and they didn't have a sponsor. So that was the end of Jarrett-Favre Motorsports.
Yeah, unfortunate that I just, for Brett, because like it seemed like every attempt, the deal was just not as good as it could have been. And shame, because even in 2000, that was a very ultra competitive year for the Xfinity Series, if you think about it. And for Jason Jarrett to kind of come up, I think he was running a lot of ARCA races at the time, trying to come up into the NASCAR ranks. It just was a very big learning curve and a bit of a struggle. And it's a shame that that team just couldn't carry on. But you know what? It's okay. Give it a couple years. And we're going to get another NFL quarterback from the same time period. Actually, more former quarterback. And a more recent reality TV show star. How about Terry Bradshaw, Mark? Man, Fitz-Bradshaw Racing. One of the coolest racing teams ever. Like that title. Yeah.
This is a fun one. This is a fun one, man. Like, this is probably my favorite of the celebrity teams. They were just a really cool team. And they were a multi-car effort in the Xfinity Series for a couple of years. And we'll give you the history. Really, it formed in 2002 after Bradshaw bought a stake in a team called Trail Motorsport, which is an Xfinity team that ran the number 8, and it was owned by Mimi and Armando Fitz. Mimi is actually Felix Sabatis's daughter. Armando married her, so his son-in-law, and they actually had bought some stuff from Sabco's defunct Xfinity team to run their own team. So they started off, and then Terry Bradshaw bought into the team, and they fielded in 2002 the number 12 for Kerry Earnhardt. And they had a bucket load of sponsors, man. The one thing about this team is that they could hustle. Whoever worked in their marketing department was a genius, because they had Hot Tamales, 1010 220, Supercuts, the U.S. Navy, Cotman Transmissions, Jana King. They had so many sponsors. It's ridiculous. They're really one of the first, they have a different sponsor every week type teams, and it's very common now, but back then it was like, holy crap, they could hustle. Like, they had Party Poker on their car. They had so many different opportunities. And I remember they were featured on NBS 24/7, which was a reality show about the Busch Series when NASCAR was really trying to build up the Busch Series in the mid 2000s. And there's an episode where they went to a trade show, and it just showed them hustling to potential sponsors by showing off a racing simulator. And here's what we do at the racetrack. And like, man, Mimi and Armando Fitz, they were great team owners. They knew what they were doing.
Oh yeah, way ahead of their time as far as like thinking about, hey, we're not trying to like just get one primary sponsor. We need a bunch of partners to be on this team, and it obviously diversified their portfolio. But just as many sponsors as they had, it seemed like they had that many drivers. All right, because then after Kerry Earnhardt, they expanded and they got a second car, which was the number 14 in 2003. That they signed former Cup Series standout Casey Atwood.
Standout is being polite.
I mean, he was the next big thing, but this was a big chance for him because he's coming back down to the Xfinity Series, Busch Series at the time. He's going to be in this car for a solid team. He's got a big sponsor with the U.S. Navy behind him. It's going to be huge. And it wasn't really that great of an effort with the two-car effort with him and Earnhardt. In 2004, Atwood would be back with the team, but Earnhardt would be out in favor of Tim Fedewa. But unfortunately, Fedewa would be alone because Atwood was released by the end of the year. So that's a kind of a shame that Casey didn't work out for the team, because just think of that potential right there, man. You had Atwood, who could have came back and really, worked it out, but I don't know, it could speak volumes for the team. Maybe the team just didn't have the equipment to have success with Atwood, or just everything just didn't gel. I don't know. But Tim Fedewa, though, a very, very serviceable Xfinity Series driver throughout the 90s and 2000s, comes in, does a really good job for the team. So, I mean, it's weird to see that they just have no success at this point, though.
Yeah, they're at a crossroads kind of like midway through 2004. They had a couple second place finishes. Fedewa finished second at New Hampshire that year. Atwood finished second at Richmond, to my boy, Robbie Gordon. And then as Atwood got let go in favor of David Stremme, who had signed with, he was in the Ganassi fold. He was like one of their development guys. So they made a deal with Ganassi in 2005 to switch to Dodge, and they would get Ganassi support, and they would field Ganassi drivers. So they had David Stremme for the full season in 2005 in the 14 U.S. Navy car, the Dodge Charger. I love those Chargers, man. God, one of those beautiful cars ever. And then they had Fedewa in the 12, and then they decided to start a third team, which was the number 40. And they had Sterling Marlin for a number of races come down and run. And they had some other guys fill in, like Scott Legacy, and I think they had Carlos Contreras run some races. He's another former diversity driver from Mexico. He ran some races and ended up being just like kind of, other than Stremme's 14 car, it was pretty dismal, because like they let Fedewa go and they had to replace him with a bunch of dudes, and it just kind of it didn't really work out for them in 2005. But Stremme went on to the Cup Series, and they lasted a few more years after that.
Yeah, they lasted a couple more seasons, but once Bradshaw was out, it became Fitz Motorsports, and that was just Armando's Fitz efforts, and he carried on with the number 22 for quite a number of years with a handful of drivers, though the era that was Fitz-Bradshaw racing saw second places from Kerry Earnhardt, Tim Fedewa, and Casey Atwood as their best finishes. So the team also tried to field Cup efforts in 2002 and 2003. 2002 saw them trying to field Cup efforts with Kerry Earnhardt. Unfortunately, though, Mother Nature just did not like Fitz-Bradshaw racing in the Cup Series, because every time they tried to attempt to qualify, qualifying got rained out and they couldn't end up qualifying. So that sucks. But they ended up making a race in 2003 when Ron Hornaday would qualify at Phoenix. So hometown boy does good. Though I don't know. I feel like it's not really his hometown track. I just always feel like Ron Hornaday in Phoenix, it's like a hometown thing.
He's West Coast, so it works.
He's West Coast, but I just feel like Phoenix is just so good for him.
Yeah.
There needs to be more short tracks on the West Coast. NASCAR, more short tracks on the West Coast.
But the lasting thing that we remember about Terry Bradshaw's NASCAR legacy is his soundbite from Charlotte in 2005 when he talked about there's too many damn Cup drivers coming down to run the Busch Series.
It's AAA racing. We're building teams, we're building owners, we're building drivers, we're building stars. If the Cup drives guys want to come over and race 35 races with us, then fine. If they just want to come over and grab some money and then get used to the track because of the impoundment issues, then I say no. I don't believe they ought to be getting our money. We've got young kids here. We've got teams that are out there trying to keep sponsors. I'm even racing a Cup guy in my series because my sponsor is tired of seeing the Cup guys up front. I'm being forced as an owner to do things that I don't want to do. That was not my intention. But we need to keep our points and we need to keep our money. And if they want to race all 35, that's a whole different story.
Oh, so ironic.
And so he hired Sterling Marlin. If you can't beat him, join him. Right, Terry? So, but yeah, it was tough for those teams back then to compete with all those Cup efforts. Like you've got these Cup guys coming down and they've got their Cup pit crew and it's tough, like it was hard, but.
Well, think about too that with the Ganassi partnership, honestly, having Sterling in the car, first you get the name of Sterling Marlin associated with whatever company you're going to have on the car when he's driving. But also for Chip, yeah, that's good because then that's like the other Chip Ganassi Racing developmental pit crew that's going to be pitting that car. Because, think about this time. This is at a time period too when pit crews are becoming super specialized roles where we're just getting specific people to just do pit stops and they're, training in the Xfinity series and then coming into the Cup series and doing the pit stops. So like this was that start of all of those kind of movements we see today and the commonalities. It's just shame that Terry just couldn't go with the system, man. He just didn't want to play the game.
Next QB on our NASCAR QB team owner depth chart is Dan Marino. That's right. The Miami Dolphins legend, Dan Marino. He, if you did not know, briefly owned a Cup car in conjunction with Bill Elliott. So he, of course, ran the number 13 Ford, which was his NFL number, as Elliott-Marino Racing. And it was sponsored by First Plus Financial. If you remember, it was painted up like the Miami Dolphins car with the orange and the aquamarine or whatever color it was. And their driver was Jerry Nadeau. Unfortunately, he was released in 1998 after just 17 starts. He had one top 20 finish. So struggled in his rookie year. They let him go, and they used a bunch of drivers to fill out the schedule. So it was a very short-lived team. It only lasted 1 year.
Everyone will remember that he qualified second at Sonoma and then sent it in and turned 1 and 2 and just ended up coming out the top of the hill in a very extreme manner. So that was very Jerry Nadeau-like, but yeah, I don't know, man. This was such a weird thing. It just never felt natural. Like looking back at it, it just doesn't seem like it's just such an odd occurrence.
To me, it's like I can't believe that happened. That's kind of my deal with it. When I look back, Dan Marino owned a team with Bill Elliott and it was a Cup team. Like really? And
yeah, it's kind of like the Brett Favre thing. Cause like with the Tim Steele connection, it makes a little sense. Cause there's like everyone's kind of in the same area, but then like the Xfinity deal is like a little out of nowhere. But yeah, that's just the way the QB game goes, man. But you know what? We got more quarterbacks to go because we got depth. All right. How about Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach? Man, Hank Hill would love this team.
Roger Staubach.
Modified Roger Staubach.
Yeah, the
But,
Cowboys
yeah.
QBs, man. The
Other
Cowboys
than
legends.
yeah. Well, I mean, this is like the King of the Hill special right here because
Oh,
this is Hall of
100%.
Fame racing, baby. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
coolest teams that should have existed 2 years before they really did.
There will be a video that we will do on this team in the
Oh,
future.
it'll be soon.
It's
Yeah.
very
But like,
interesting.
it's so interesting because like, I think this is so interesting. Even as we look back, I still scratch my head thinking about it.
Mhm.
But this team was originally announced in 2003, Hall of Fame Racing, and they were going to go and be on track in 2004. Now, 2004 came and went, Mark, and you know what? I don't remember seeing Hall of Fame Racing.
I don't think I remember seeing them on track. No.
No, I don't. No. So then 2005 comes around, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna be there for 2005, full cup effort with an alliance with Hendrick Motorsports. And I'm like, okay. So Mark, whatever happened to that, man?
Yeah, I don't know. That never happened. So apparently they had a contract, and then that didn't happen. So we didn't see them in 2005 either.
Okay. So two years go by, still no team. A lot of hoopla though.
Mhm.
So finally we get to 2006. And I think we all remember this now because this seems a little more correct. So now with an alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing, they're going to come and they're going to field the number 96 DLP HD TV and Texas Instruments Chevrolet. I always loved that sponsor. It was such a cool,
sick paint scheme too.
Sick, yeah, such a sick paint scheme. Now, originally, Tony Raines was signed to be the full-time driver during the 2006 season, but he didn't make the first 5 starts, I believe, because it was Terry Labonte, and that was because of the top 35 rule at the time, which was so stupid. Man, I hated the top 35
I loved
rule.
it. I thought it was great. I'd love to debate that one day because I thought it was great.
Yeah, because it hurt your boy more than anybody else.
I know it did, but it made sense. It
made sense, but yeah, I mean, it made sense, but to me, I think what made more sense about the old rule was it gave more value to the driver than it did to the team.
You can thank 2004 Atlanta for the reason that we have the points the way they are, or have them the way they are for those years. So 58 drivers and a bunch of top teams didn't make the field, so we changed the rules.
Yeah, but in the end, still top teams don't make the field at times. But I just find it silly because it really faulted Tony Raines for his inability to like.
They basically started his return to the Cup Series with Tony. We don't think that you're good enough to qualify for the first 5 races on speed.
Yeah.
So we're going to hire Terry Labonte and use his past champions provisional to make those 5 races. I remember when that got announced, I was like, that's so shady. Like, come on. You're going to hire a guy just because he has a provisional? Now, I know Steve Grissom made a career out of that in the Busch Series, but like, come on.
Like, I'm this was like not the only time this has happened. Many times like teams have kind of manipulated the first 5 races in some way of like, trading owner points or something, and it's silly to me. I just didn't like it at the time, and it hurt Tony in my eyes because like I wanted to see Tony Raines in the car. I didn't want to see Terry Labonte. No offense to Terry, because when we did see him in the car, I mean, he was pretty competitive even for being that guy who was running a partial schedule at Hendrick Motorsports the year prior. He still had some good fight in him, but for the team, it was important, like you said, because it allowed them to keep building championship points in the first 5 races instead of like being in a hole for the season. And they had a pretty good 2006 season.
Yeah, they did all right. Tony drove on the road courses as well, actually. Sorry, Terry drove on the road courses as well, and he got their best finish of the season, 3rd place at Sonoma. They did a crazy fuel gamble. Felipe Lopez, the crew chief, called this crazy strategy, and they got a 3rd place finish out of it.
So I guess like the one sour note I will say about 2006, and it's always just like a shocker to me, is when Tony Raines was qualifying for the Coke 600, and he had that really sick Lightning McQueen DLP Chevrolet.
Fire.
Just so good. I mean, that was the closest thing you could be to being Lightning McQueen because, I mean, he's number 90. I know Lightning's 95, but Tony's 96, so it was perfect. But then what was not perfect was he just backed that thing into the turns 3 and 4 wall and during qualifying and just destroyed that car.
Get out the backup car.
Did the backup car look like Lightning McQueen though? I think it did.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
better
he
have
40th in that race. So
they learned their lessons though from Jeff Gordon with the Bugs Bunny paint scheme when he like wrecked it, and then they're like, oh, we don't have another Bugs Bunny car. I guess we have to unload the flame car. Boom.
That was a tough season though, man. They had one top 10 with Tony Raines at Charlotte in the fall. That was it. He finished 35th in points. So
it was a hard season for him, and I think it was just hard for the team too, because like they were a very new team, and I feel like this team is a very good example of like how Levine Family Racing functioned as that Joe Gibbs satellite team.
Mm-hmm.
But like we didn't have Twitter and all of the technology to like communicate what's going on. So yeah, but going into the next season, we would have more consistency because Tony Raines is going to run full time. Except he's not going to run on the road courses again, Mark. And the team's going to call in a ringer.
Well, the only guy you call if you have a Chevy race car and you're going to Sonoma and Watkins Glen, you call Ron Fellows, the man, the myth, the legend. And he had a top 5 finish at Watkins Glen. And that was the first season of the car tomorrow as well. So also driving a brand new race car, but it don't matter. Give me 4 wheels and physics and Ron Fellows top 5.
So, you know, Mark, I hate to talk about this, but 2008 with this team, man.
Yeah, so Aikman and Staubach got out after 2007. They're like, nope. And they noped right out of there. They were like, 2 years is enough. They probably lost a bunch of money. And they were like, we're done. DLP HDTV was still around in 2008. Gibbs switched to Toyota. So naturally, Hall of Fame switched with them. They actually sold the team to Jeff Morad and Tom Garfinkel, who are executives of the Arizona Diamondbacks. So they sold the football guys, sold their team to the baseball guys. They hired J.J. Yaley and had an absolutely terrible season. And then I guess the team kind of merged with Yates in 2009 and then disappeared. And that was the end of Hall of Fame racing. So,
yep. And, you know, that's the way that cookie crumbles, man, because just the way it goes. You know, you sell it off to some other people and you're like, yeah, it's your financial problem now. But
basically, yeah.
You
just say, you know what? Nope, right out of there. And there's always somebody that thinks they can come in and fix it. You know, they're like, we'll run it better. It's like, no, you won't.
No, nobody does, unfortunately. So that's a shame that team kind of came and went. But then, you know, we got another football guy here. We got Mr. Jim Kelly.
Jim Kelly, the Bills quarterback, the 4-time Super Bowl losing quarterback, Jim Kelly.
He's Super Bowl runner-up, man.
If you haven't seen Four Falls of Buffalo, by the way, watch it because it's amazing. The ESPN documentary.
Just watch all the 30 for 30s.
They're all so especially broke, because that really comes back to what we're talking about here: investing in terrible things. But Jim
Kelly, man, he tried to get onto the ground floor of what a lot of other of these guys have done, which is not the Cup team, but let's go to the Xfinity team. You know, let's go for a Busch team.
And don't start a team, buy into a team.
Yeah.
So he bought into Frank CC Racing, which is one of like the most, you know, famous Busch Series teams. They're all through the 90s, winning races with Todd Bodine and Mike McLaughlin. The number 34 car, which was part owned actually by Jimmy Spencer at the time. And they brought in Jim Kelly to try and get some sponsorship for the 34 car. They got Les Kara Kitchens to come in 2003. Mike McLaughlin drove in just 6 races. That was all they had them funding for. He did have a 9th place finish at Daytona, but the team shut down for 2004. But it was okay because it came back in 2005. In 2005, they returned with Randy LaJoie, former 2-time Busch Series champion, driving the Dollar General car, number 34. Had an okay year. He had 3 top 10s. Sometimes they would replace him with Todd Bodine, and Bodine would run the car. And man, Todd Bodine always just comes in and runs really well. He's just like such a great ringer to have, a great veteran driver. Didn't really pan out with LaJoie. He left after 2005 and 2006. They ran a bunch of different drivers and kind of started this decline. It was tough to see CC go through this season of just not doing very well. They had like Kim Crosby and Paul Tracy, former Champ Car champion, drove some races. They came back for '07 and they had a deal worked out with an ARCA driver that fell through. And then the team kind of just disappeared after that. They sold everything off at the end of '07. So Jim Kelly, yeah, really, he was there for a few years, but the team never really had any success, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a shame just because, that's such a team that, like we've said before, you get into an existing team. The existing team was one of the most dominant or consistently competitive Xfinity teams throughout the 90s, especially with Magic Shoes behind the wheel and with Todd Bodine. But shame that it just kind of ends like this. But oh well, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So next up, we got Cash Money, homie. Cash Money, Randy Moss. That's right, Randy Moss owned a NASCAR team. Randy Moss always loved NASCAR. Ever since his upbringing in West Virginia, he loved to watch NASCAR. And in 2008, he set his sights out on NASCAR. All right? He was on a mission, and his mission was successful because in the summer of 2008, he would buy 50% of the stake in Morgan Dollar Motorsports, renaming the team to Randy Moss Motorsports, changing the number from 46 to 81. Now, when Randy took over the team, Willie Allen was driving the truck. Landon Castle was signed as a developmental driver to the team. He finished his races out. Then Mark Davis drove. Jimmy Johnson drove one race, his only truck start at Bristol. And then they finished the season with Donnie Leah as their more consistent driver in 2008. In 2009, the team took a chance on Taylor Malsom as their young up-and-coming driver and somehow made a deal happen to sign champion Mike Skinner to their team, which was kind of crazy, or just a weird movement of just buying one team, restructuring some stuff, and then they got Skinner basically within that acquisition of the other team. So when Skinner drove for the team in 2009, he actually earned their first victory at Kansas, scored back-to-back wins later on in the season at Iowa and Gateway, which was huge for his first year with the team and literally the team's real first season. Also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the season, they swapped from Chevrolet to Toyota. So now they were a two-truck Toyota affiliate instead of what was Morgan Dollar's long-standing Chevrolet, truck effort. So it was a big shift for the team at the time. But a lot of the success in 2009 has to be attributed to Eric Phillips. We all know Eric Phillips from the Xfinity Series and from Joe Gibbs Racing nowadays. Has a very outstanding record, very great crew chief. He got his start with Morgan Dollar Motorsports in the Truck Series and carried on into working with Randy Moss and was Skinner's crew chief in 2009. Balsam had a solid season too, man. He claimed 1 top 5 and earned 10 top 10s in his rookie season. Not too bad, though. It's not competitive enough, though, for the Truck Series. So in 2010, Skinner would return, but Phillips would not, which was unfortunate, and it could show because Skinner did have a very lackluster season. Now, Timothy Peters would also be signed to the team to drive the number 81, which was big. Now, this team was going to have 2 veterans, but unfortunately, after 16 races, Peters was released from the team due to lackluster results. And the team would actually take the next 2 races off to evaluate the program. But in reality, when Peters left, he took his sponsor with him to SS Greenlight Racing, and he actually finished inside the top 10 in his first start with SS Greenlight, which was a huge statement because, you went from Randy Moss Motorsport over to SS Greenlight and then finishes top 10 on a 1.5 mile track. It's evaluate that performance, dude. So, a weird acquisition would then later come from SS Greenlight. They would actually acquire the number 81 and a fleet of trucks from Randy Moss, and Peters would actually finish the season in the number 81 under the SS Greenlight banner, though. So it's kind of crazy. But that would be the end of the actual number 81 team for Randy Moss Motorsports. Skinner would go and finish out the season to lackluster results and would not return in 2011, but rather they would sign another champion, Travis Quaffle. Now, he was going to drive the number 5 in 2011, and they actually got a new sponsor with International Trucking and Monaco RVs that actually wanted to stay with the team even after their lackluster 2010 season. But unfortunately, after 10 races, the sponsor actually had a contractual agreement that said that they could get out, which they took, and the team never fielded another entry after that. And that was the end of Randy Moss Motorsports, because in 2012, the equipment was sold, the building was locked up, and the number 5 team would go on to become Walters Motorsports. So that's a shame, man, because Randy had a smart idea. He wanted to start in the truck series because he wanted to start at a level where everybody else kind of didn't start, you know. They always fight, they always aim high. And when you aim high, especially in this industry, sometimes you're going to crash hard. And, you know, you look at Brad Doherty, he did the same thing with his truck team, had a couple of good years, and then it kind of went. So I don't know, man, is Randy Moss going to come back in the Cup Series one of these days? Who knows? But that'd be cool to see. Randy had a lot of crazy ideas, man. Even back during this time period when he owned a team, he actually even wanted to build a track in West Virginia to host NASCAR races. He was really involved in the sport and cared a lot about it. Just a shame that he couldn't have the success as a team owner.
Yeah, and if you go back and listen to the episode before this one, 54, Landon Castle actually talked about driving for Randy Moss Motorsports, which is kind of cool. And I forgot to ask him if Randy paid him in cash, you know, because when you're rich, you don't write checks. Straight cash, homie.
All right, next up on the list, he is a very cash money kind of guy. He's not Mr. Cash Money, though. He's another boxer, though. Evander Holyfield, man. We all know Evander Holyfield. Man, you want to talk? What was that 30 for 30 he was in with Mike Tyson?
I don't think I watched that one, man. I'm not really a boxing guy, so
no, that was so good though, because not to get off tangent with this podcast, people, but with that one, it was really more about how even as the champion, he was never regarded as the champion. People never gave him the respect. Much like how a lot of NASCAR fans don't give people who win a lot respect, like Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt, Richard Petty, just to name a few. Yeah, but anyways, back to the podcast really quick. So, Mark, he's the first boxer to own a NASCAR team. That's a pretty big, pretty big statement at the time. But he didn't just own any team. He kind of had a bit of an interesting partnership.
Yeah, so he bought out what was left of all of Ganassi's Dodge stuff at the end of 2008. At the end of 2008,
yes.
So they switched to Chevy for 2009 with their deal with Earnhardt. So they sold off all their Dodge stuff. So he got together with this guy, Eddie Smith, and they bought all of the Dodge cars, the Xfinity cars, and they ran the number 42. It was interesting. So they ran 25 starts between 2009 and 2010. Kind of an underfunded effort is kind of how they're remembered. Like they never really had all the pieces there to really be a successful team. They had Kevin Hamlin drove for them. Kenny Hendrick drove for them. Parker Kligerman, while he was a Penske development driver, did a race for them. David Gilliland also drove for them. And Brandon McReynolds, son of Larry McReynolds, was their last driver. Never really did too much. I think they had 1 or 2 top 10s. It wasn't really a successful venture, and Holyfield got out after 2010. So.
No, I do remember them. ESPN gave them quite a bit of spotlight while they were competing, and obviously at this time, ESPN had all of the Xfinity races on their networks. So obviously to showcase the first ever professional boxer to own a NASCAR team and also a sports icon who owns a NASCAR team, it's understandable why that coverage got. But to me, they were like the one of those teams you wanted to see finish inside the top 15 because that's where you knew that they could run. If they got a top 10, that's a good day. Kind of like watching Johnny Davis Motorsports or Jeremy Clemens racing team nowadays or Sieg's Motorsports team. Those are the kind of teams you like to watch in the Xfinity Series and the good stories you see, and that was kind of cool to see there. Now, let's talk about a team. I don't know if this team even, I don't know.
Does it even exist? Does it? You know?
I feel like it's a thought that someone made a website for. So
Yeah. Well, hey, we've got the inside scoop. We're talking about the Money Team, which is the best name for a NASCAR team
oh yeah.
by
Like what team are
far.
you? We're the money
Or the
team.
Money Team.
Why are
Owned by
you the money team? Because we just spend money, B.
Yeah, exactly. Owned by Floyd Mayweather, and they're named after his lifestyle brand, like Money, the Money brand or whatever. I don't know
I
all the
feel like that's his
details.
posse too, like G Unit, like how 50 Cent
G
started the
Unit.
brand off
Oh
of
my
G Unit.
God. G
It
Unit.
like literally Floyd
Oh.
Mayweather just did that with the money team.
That's like what they talk about in that tangent again, the Broke documentary, the ESPN documentary, where it's like you're not successful until you have an entourage and you don't know who half of them are. That's when you're
Yep.
successful. It's like we used to roll 6 guys deep and I didn't know half of them. It's like perfect.
That's
Right.
what's up.
So the Money Team, basically there is a photo mock-up of the car. It's number 50 is a number apparently they secured because Mayweather ended his career 50-0.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Earnhardt was rumored to be the driver. They have a Twitter account. They have an animated video they posted of the logo on March 21st, 2020. That's the last time they've really done anything. But I, James, have the inside scoop. I have spoken with a photographer who claims to have a signed contract to be their NASCAR photographer. So he has assured me the team does exist.
I would think they do. I mean, it's to kind of arc back to Moss. When Moss was like initially looking for a team, he had an LLC made called Moss Motorsports. Obviously, that's not the name. Wasn't the name of the team, but he was prepared to do it. I feel like all Floyd Mayweather did was just make another LLC and got it registered. And then he was like, all right, let's start doing other things. Let's make a website, call this photographer, get a PR hoopla going, do something else.
Like they seem like the kind of team, the kind of guy who'd have like his like media agency and like video people hired like before they even have any race cars, like we have to get all this hype stuff. It's like, why don't you like hire some people and buy some cars first, maybe?
Yeah, or just like maybe, as everyone else has pointed out, buy into another team. That's like thing. Probably the best thing to do, like Randy Moss did, or kind of how Evander Holyfield did. He bought existing assets. Like there was nothing really substantial here to see that. Just and I'm only saying that now because like if you think about just everything we've talked about, there's like evidence that like okay, there's something that's going to happen here. Then the team is formed and that it happens. This is just this whole thing's been smoke and mirrors from day one, man.
Yeah,
it's like the biggest conspiracy theory ever.
And now with the pandemic and with the next gen car, like, does this team exist? I don't know. I think you'd be better off buying into a team like Johnny Davis Racing or something. You know what I mean? Like buying into them. They have assets. You inject some funds, they could be really successful, right? Like,
yeah, and not only assets but personnel too. You keep a guy like Johnny Davis. Johnny Davis isn't gonna like walk away from the sport. He's gonna stay involved. And that's the thing people need. They need to associate themselves with people who know the sport really well, and obviously are going to continue to work in it. So, I mean, you look at a guy like Chip Ganassi. Why has he been so successful in NASCAR? Because I mean, Tony Glover, right from the start. Right? Yeah,
he bought into Sadco, so it was perfect, right? And look at that successful entity. And James, we have one more celebrity owner to talk about, and it is the most recent celebrity owner in NASCAR, and that is greatest of all time, Michael Jordan.
Yeah, Michael, MJ, Jordan. This is a really interesting deal. It's really been cool to see Michael Jordan's involvement in the sport since his retirement from the game of basketball, and just his involvement too in the NBA, being a team owner there. It's just nice to see that he wants to be involved in this. So, for those of you who don't know, actually, Michael Jordan did own an AMA sports bike team back in 2004. It was called Michael Jordan Motorsports. Monten Stewart was their driver. Montex Stewart was their driver. They won their first race in 2010, and that was with Jake Zimbeck. And, unfortunately, that team didn't last because they would they would dissolve in 2003. But that was Michael's like really first racing effort. But for most fans, they don't know that Michael Jordan was a huge NASCAR fan because of his upbringing too, much like Randy Moss and Brad Daugherty. He grew up in the Carolinas, man. So when you're growing up around this region, you're heavily embedded with the sport, you know.
Yeah, he went to UNC as well, right? So it would have been right in North Carolina around NASCAR. And yeah, he had the Superbike team, but obviously they didn't have a lot of success. Shut down after 2013, but he had huge really cool, sponsors there, though. He had like Gatorade and Hanes and all kinds of big sponsors because that's the allure of having a celebrity buy into your team, is that they can bring you sponsorship. That's really the effect we've seen. Like Terry Bradshaw was in Supercuts commercials and 1010 220 commercials, and they sponsored his race car, right? So that's really the big thing. But this new deal with Denny Hamlin is huge. So it's Jordan's going to be majority owner, with Hamlin as a minority owner, Bubba Wallace the driver, and Bubba Wallace is bringing the majority of the sponsorship from Cash App, DoorDash, and Columbia Sportswear. So we don't know what number they're going to run, James, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be number 23 because that would just make sense. Or does he go with his baseball number, 45?
I just don't see it not being 23. It just seems like it would be a very natural thing for Jordan to have his brand and association carry on. And much like Randy Moss did when he brought his number from gameplay over to racing. And much like you said too, with selling your face, I don't know how much Michael Jordan will be selling his face here. I like how Brad Daugherty and Randy Moss both weren't the kind of gentlemen who were like, I'm going to sell my face to sell this, to sell sponsorship to this team. I want my team to be sustainable on its own. I just want to be a part of it. I wonder what Michael will do with that, if he'll just kind of stay out of the spotlight when he'll come to races. There's a lot of interesting things to ask there. Obviously, if fans don't know, Michael Jordan does come to races. He's been coming to races for a very long time. I've seen him there multiple times. And when he's there, he's normally there to support his man and his boy, Denny Hamlin. So he's very involved. And they actually even had a esports team, didn't they?
Yep.
Yeah. So, this relationship has been going on for quite some time. It'll be very interesting to see. I'd like to see it last a while, though. That's the question. How long will it last?
Hopefully a long time, man, because I think they're in a situation to be very successful with all the funding coming in. The help they're going to get from Joe Gibbs Racing. So,
well, that's the question, because look at
other
further up the list.
Satellite team has been bad and has shut down.
Yep, well, Hall of Fame Racing.
Furniture Row won the championship and then shut down. So, Joe Gibbs support kill race teams?
Well, and here's the thing too, where I feel like you mentioned Furniture Row. Here's the biggest difference I feel like between at least this team and Furniture Row. Furniture Row, unfortunately, wasn't just the sponsor, they were the team owner. And when you're in that position, there is truly an ROI, and you can't just bat the eyes at losing money. At some point, it really weighs on you. When you have at least $15 million coming in from Columbia, Cash App, and DoorDash, that's money that's going to fund you. And there are more companies that are going to continue to want to fund this team, especially as it goes forward, barring success. And if there is success, much like we did see with Furniture Row, I don't doubt we're going to hear, reporters saying, "Oh, Bubba Wallace, new contract with whatever sponsor." I don't know who's not going to want to throw money at them if they're not being successful, Mark.
It's true, man. And all I'll say is this: the last thing about that team is the second that the team's Jordan wear becomes available with the number and the jump man, sign me up. Just take my money now.
Shoes, I'll get a pair of shoes. I haven't bought shoes, dude, in like 5 years, maybe longer. I used to work retail, so I have plenty of shoes, people. I used to work at a Nike store. All right, I got Nikes for days. But I would buy that pair. I don't care how much it costs.
Oh, 100%.
Just to collect it. Yeah.
Definitely.
Be cool.
Like I have a pair of Jordans. Like, come on, everybody wants Jordans. I wanted Jordans when I was a kid so bad, my mom would never buy them, and I bought my first pair when I was 28 because I finally wanted to have a pair.
And you sent your picture to mom, be like, "Freak you, mom! I got my Jordans, got my J's."
Now I never wear them because I don't hoop anymore. So but
I'm still waiting for those Jordan Janowskis, Nike, the double J's, truly. But
yeah.
I would be really excited to see these collaborations, Mark, like you're saying, like with Jordan Brand.
Oh, it's gonna be awesome. I'm very excited.
And I'm excited to see another Jordan Brand fire suit out there too, because I love 100%. Denny Hamlin always wearing Jordan Brand. Yeah, it's so cool. Oh, and all it is just a Simpson fire suit, Yeah.
And that's the thing. It just has a Jordan logo on it. It's like when the Michigan football team started having the Jumpman on the logo. It's like they have a basketball logo on their football uniforms, but it looks sick. So
exactly, it's just that the brand is so iconic.
Well, James, I think we've gone off on some pretty crazy tangents tonight.
Yeah, I think this has been a great episode.
It's been fun, and it's a longer episode, but that just means more enjoyment for all of.
Hey, we were just chatting. I feel like people like to hear chatting, rapping here and there, back and forth. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode of Flashback to the Track, episode 55. Put 2 hands up, and it's 55, not 10. And as always, we're presented by Blue Emu. And as we said, try some Blue Emu recovery bath in your bath today. And Mark, tell the people how this smells.
It smells amazing. It smells unbelievable. First off, it's got a beautiful menthol smell. And when you get out, though, you don't stink like menthol. It's just when you're in the bath. So it's very soothing. Throw your Epsom salts away and just get yourself some Blue Emu recovery bath. I went on a 30-kilometer run 2 weeks ago, destroyed myself, sat in the bath, felt amazing. So I endorse the Blue Emu recovery bath. It is amazing.
Yeah. And if you don't want to stink because you just don't want to, try some Blue Emu lidocaine cream. Don't stink. That's so awesome about these products. I mean, other than the bath bomb, which I like, because that's like, as you said, it adds that extra element of relaxation to the bath experience. Normally the other products, I need to use them quick and easy. And it's great that they don't stink. So
especially the lidocaine, because it's got like the applicator. You don't have to get your hands dirty or anything.
Oh yeah, like I think people don't understand that. It's like, you open this thing and it's like this nice smooth texture thing on it. I know if you're listening, you're like, what are you talking about? It's like, well then, you should go to the store.
Go pick one up.
Go pick one up, take it out of the box, start playing with it, do all that. But make sure you purchase it. Don't just leave it. Don't put it back on the shelf. Go to the checkout counter and take your wallet out and then pay for it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Get yourself some Blue Emu because it is amazing.
Don't do anything we just told you to do except go buy the Blue Emu. Please just go buy it. It works well. If you have any aches or pains, try Blue Emu. You won't regret it. Available at Walmart. Mark, this has been a great episode, man.
Yeah, it's been fun.
What do you think? What do you think is your favorite though, out of all the teams we talked about?
Fitz-Bradshaw, definitely my favorite.
Bradshaw?
They're just so cool paint schemes, man. That's the thing I remember, and I just remember the revolving Dora drivers, and they were an interesting team.
Their cars just look so cool, I wish they for Kerry. I really wish he could have won a race, and even Tim. Tim was really competitive in that car.
Kerry was just second at Kansas, but he just never was able to put it together, unfortunately.
That's unfortunate.
Well,
I gotta pick. If I'm gonna pick one, I gotta say.
Well, obviously Randy Moss. So, and look for something in the near future about Randy Moss. Maybe a bit of a deep dive on that team. So, James might be working on something.
We'll see. But, anyways, Mark, let's wrap it up for tonight, man. I know it's getting late by you. It's getting late over here. Technically, we're on the same.
We're on the same time zone.
Yeah. It's all
Eastern time, best time.
Exactly. That's when Cup Series races should be starting on is Eastern time. No offense, West Coast Pacific people. But until the next episode, that is Mark. I am James. We're two dudes who will probably be reviewing a race that you don't know about in the next episode of Flashback to the Track, presented by Blue Emu. Have a great one.
Bye.